In the guidebook, Death Note How to Read, the Shinigami Ryuk is given the intelligence rating of 6. For comparison, the Shinigami Rem is given the intelligence rating of 7. But if you were to ask a Death Note fan, they'd probably say Ryuk is more intelligent. Or at the very least, he's a lot more clever than Rem is. I mean, only one of them's alive in the Death Note bonus chapter, so take that however you will. Ryuk's intelligence rating is something I've always taken issue with, and that's the point of today's video. I would like to propose to all of you that Ryuk is actually a lot smarter than you probably think. The main character of Death Note, Light Yagami, is the second smartest character in the series, behind only L because of plot. Being so smart, isn't it kinda wild that the one character he concedes to not being able to manipulate is Ryuk? The Shinigami with an intelligence rating of 6? Really think about that for a second. Light Yagami is probably one of the most manipulative characters in fiction. Being able to swindle his way out of situations with characters like Naomi, who is an incredibly accomplished detective via the BB murder cases. Or even being able to manipulate a Shinigami into killing his arch nemesis for him. The Shinigami that is supposedly more intelligent than Ryuk, by the way. Rem is a character that has experienced firsthand what happens when a Shinigami gets in the way of someone's fate. But Light is somehow able to manipulate her right into his hands, but not Ryuk, someone that is apparently less intelligent. In every other scenario where Light has had his position threatened, Ryuk makes it very clear that he's not willing to just give Light a handout. This is shown multiple times throughout the manga and anime, but it's made abundantly clear at the end of the original manga specifically, where Light is literally begging Ryuk for help, and in response, Ryuk just writes Light's name in his own death note. This is something that Light never saw coming, despite Ryuk telling him all the way back in chapter 1. On that note though, isn't it kinda weird how Light just seems to lose all sense of forethought whenever he's around Ryuk? The whole reason the story of Death Note kicks off is because Ryuk is bored. Light is only really there to serve as entertainment for him. As soon as he stops being entertaining, Ryuk will just write his name down in the Death Note and move on to the next guy, like he does in the Death Note bonus chapter. When Light Yagami finally gets his comeuppance at the end of the original manga, Ryuk says he doesn't want to just sit around waiting for Light to die if he gets put in prison. I bring all this up because if Light were to truly achieve his goal of becoming god of the new world, with no one to oppose him like L, Nier, or Mello, what's to say that Ryuk won't just kill him then? Something that a lot of people don't actually remember about Death Note is that Ryuk views the whole thing as sort of a drama. He's kind of like an audience stand-in. He's sitting there alongside us watching everything unfold. Similar to how a viewer might get bored and drop a show they're watching, if Ryuk got bored of Light doing the same thing for years on end, he'd probably just write his name down and be done with the whole thing. Considering this is something that even normal people in real life can figure out, it's a little insane that Light never had this cross his mind even once. You could argue that everything I've been talking about so far was unintentional, and that the author really didn't want you to think about it that hard. However, there are multiple points in the Death Note manga and anime that imply that Light is actually Ryuk's victim. Ryuk is meant to represent the dark side of Light. There are multiple parallels drawn between the two of them in the Death Note opening chapter and the first episode of the anime. If Ryuk really was unintelligent, then this comparison wouldn't make any sense. On that note, Ryuk is usually able to follow along with Light's plans easily and rarely questions him, or is often the one explaining why he's doing things to the audience. The one time you could argue he doesn't really do this is when Light and L meet for the first time, but that would more so come down to a misunderstanding of human culture. A misunderstanding of something you're not familiar with doesn't make you unintelligent, it just makes you ignorant. And you could argue that ignorance is a trait of unintelligence, but it's not a mistake that Ryuk repeats again. Repeated ignorance would be a trait of unintelligence. I'm not necessarily saying that Ryuk is as smart or even smarter than Light, but I am saying that someone with the intellect rating of 6 likely wouldn't be able to keep up with Light Yagami. If you want an example of someone who is unable to keep up with Light and is actively unintelligent, just look at Misa.
This is the first time in my life that I've been provoked to hit a woman.
Hello? Base department?
This is a joke, please don't hit women. Misa is by no means unintelligent compared to normal people. I'd say she's actually smarter than me, to be realistic. And you could very well argue that she's nerfed most of the time because she's infatuated with Light, which makes her susceptible to his manipulation. But that's the thing, Misa can be manipulated, Ryuk can't be manipulated. Now, I know I'm not exactly breaking new ground here. Most people would probably say that Ryuk is smarter than Misa, but that more so comes from a misunderstanding of how intelligent Misa actually is. Honestly, Misa could probably be a whole video for herself, but we'll stick to Ryuk for now. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that Ryuk is a lot closer to Light's intellectual equal than a lot of people probably think. Ryuk also has an advantage in Death Note that no other character really has, but that's a little more complicated to explain.
We interrupt this program to bring you...
Have you ever wanted to give me money? Oh, sorry, 1 second. Really now. Okay, fine, whatever, jeez. Okay, so apparently my lawyer says I lack tact, whatever that is. Anyway, in all seriousness though, hi, my name is Unremarkable. I like money. I am not going to hide this from you. I don't have a Patreon or anything, so if you want to support me, just request a video at UnremarkableYT69 on Cash App. It'll be on the screen and in the description in case I mispronounced it at all. It's $1, bare minimum. If you want to donate more, you can, but I'm not like fucking Divine over here charging $50 a video. Like, I promise you, you don't need to charge that much for a video. Your videos are like 9 minutes long anyway. Okay, but seriously though, if you want to, great. If you don't, fair enough, you know, I don't like spending money either. Okay, now back to the show. The creators of Death Note have gone on record saying that Light and L aren't perfect because otherwise there would be no story. And this applies to pretty much every character that is at least a little plot relevant. Even Shinigami like Rem have attachments that lead to their downfall. L is oftentimes weighed down by burden of proof, and Light is proud and oftentimes gets in his own way or overlooks things due to his ego. Even characters later in the manga like Nier and Mello are imperfect. Mello isn't as intelligent as a lot of the top tiers in the series, and Nier lacks the initiative and agency that L had. Ryuk is unique in that I think he's the only major character that doesn't have any notable flaws, at least regarding his intelligence. His only real weakness, in quotations, would be his addiction to apples, but that's played for comedy more than anything else. Ryuk doesn't have any attachments that someone can use as leverage against him. He doesn't have anything in the series that might impair his judgment. His only nerf is when he begins to go through withdrawals if he doesn't get any apples. But even then he proves himself to be incredibly intelligent even when physically distressed, but we'll get back to that later. Am I saying Ryuk is perfect? Maybe, I honestly don't know. But what I am saying is that he doesn't have any plot-imposed flaws. Ryuk is unique in that he doesn't impact the story too much past the opening and the ending. Unless you consider being bored a flaw, Ryuk really doesn't need any for the story to work. This whole video I've been going over narrative implications and his position in the story and all that, but if you've watched my channel at all, you know that I'm primarily a Feats guy. I don't like narrative scaling because it could be inconsistent and oftentimes biased, so usually I judge characters and their capabilities based on what they've shown in the past. This entire video I've been avoiding his feats because they aren't really that numerous because Ryuk isn't a major character. However, he still has a few very impressive showings that I'd like to share now. Early on in the manga, when L hides cameras inside of Light's room, Ryuk goes out of his way to memorize the exact location of all 64 of them. He does this while under immense physical distress, as just recently he had started going through withdrawals because he hadn't been eating enough apples. For comparison, I'm basically out of commission if I don't get my caffeine fix for the day. Towards the end of the original manga, Ryuk actually says that he thought that Light was going to be able to get out of the warehouse victorious. You could interpret this line a few different ways, but my personal interpretation is that Ryuk actually managed to think of a way that Light could win even in this dire scenario. He even schools on Light and says that he's acting undignified, which is absolutely wild. This line could also just mean that Ryuk had a lot more faith in Light than he probably should have at this point in the story. Probably his best intelligence feat though is when he was able to trick the Shinigami King into giving him a second Death Note. For context, the Shinigami King is the most intelligent being in the entire series and is stated to have immeasurable intelligence in Death Note How to Read. He's also considered to be some sort of eldritch abomination that humans can't fully comprehend. For a quick comparison, the Shinigami Nu is stated to have an intellect rating of 10 and is literally not inquisitive about anything. And the Shinigami King would be incomprehensibly more intelligent than her, yet Ryuk was somehow able to trick him. A feat of intelligence that I don't think anyone in the series, Light and L included, would be able to replicate. Before I wrap this video up, I want to cover a couple potential anti-feats and anti-statements for Ryuk. In the novel covering the BB murder cases, Mello theorizes that the only reason Ryuk was able to trick the Shinigami King was because the Shinigami King thought that it would be entertaining. Basically, he knew that giving Ryuk a second Death Note would result in the events of the show taking place. Given the fact that the Shinigami King is stated to be beyond human comprehension, this is entirely possible. However, this is just a theory that Mello comes up with. It's not guaranteed to be true. Another potential anti-feat for Ryuk would be his showings in the Death Note one-shot, the Akira story. To be honest, I have my own thoughts and opinions on this specific chapter, but to keep it related to the video, Ryuk is manipulated by a character that most people would generally agree is less intelligent than Light. Even Ryuk was like, wow, you don't know English, which I always thought was strange, but you could argue that this is just Ryuk being bored and going along with things because he wants something entertaining to happen. However, I should mention that it's Ryuk who's laughing at the end of the story, so, you know, take that however you will. Anyway, that about wraps it up for today's video. I had a lot of fun making this. Death Note is new ground for the channel, so if you want me to make more content like this, I don't know, subscribe or some shit. I also don't usually do normal outros like this, but I figured since this is a Death Note video and it's a lot more laid back than my usual content, I should act at least somewhat professional for this. Anyway.
We already know the smell of a